Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Hey, welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy Bollocks. Hey, Chewy.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, man. How you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. It's been a weird old day.
Has been a weird old day. It's been an odd and peculiar old day. It's been a bizarre and a weird and an odd and a peculiar old day.
So much has happened just today. I was just running through what we might talk about tonight, and then I was just like, oh, fuck, there's actually quite a bit to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things. Some of these people do these sorts of shows on the internet around the world. American in particular has these sorts of commentary shows, and you see some of them are 2-hour daily shows, sometimes 2-3 hour daily shows. Obviously, they're focusing on American content, but you can see very quickly how if you get a sort of a big day, I mean, we struggle to shut down this thing in the evenings anyway, that it could easily be a 2 to 2.5 hour show just covering off the news of the day. It's just that easy, especially with a bunch of fabulous people contributing along the ways as well and offering their lovely insights and some dicks, some lovely people and some dicks, basically. Yeah, so one of the things we're not going to touch on, but I think maybe because you brought it up in our pre-game chat, was what's happening in Poland with Russia at the moment. Let's just touch on this super quick, because it seems a bit murky and muddy. Of course, most of us heard the news today and we thought, fuck, Russia escalating, going into a NATO country. That means, you know, a war on one is a war on many. That's basically what NATO says. If you invade one NATO country, you invade us all, and we're in, you know. And then there was another report that came out later today that said Russian-made missile, or it was a Russian missile. But then today also there's a report that says from Biden, actually Biden says that the missile is unlikely to have been fired from Russia. Now, I guess that's couched it slightly, isn't it? Because it doesn't mean it's not Russia firing the missile. It just means it's not from the land in Russia. US president says trajectory of missile suggests it was not launched by Russian forces waging war in Ukraine, but will await results of investigation. Joe Biden said the missile that landed in Poland, killing 2 people, was unlikely to be fired from Russia due to its trajectory. The US president was speaking at the G20 meeting in Bali, Indonesia, after convening an emergency meeting of Western leaders to discuss the explosion on NATO territory, and that had his potential take on the war in Ukraine into a new, more dangerous dimension. Asked if the missile was fired from Russia, Biden said, quote, "There is preliminary information that contests that. I don't want to say until we completely investigate, but it is unlikely in the minds of its trajectory," that was a mistake, and there's something of its trajectory, that it was fired from Russia. He added, but we will see. Yeah. So yeah, it's because the biggest thing is if you attack a NATO country, then part of their what do you call it, edict, agreement, collective agreement, are they socialists, is that that they're all in, all other NATO joins in to respond to that country.
Yep, absolutely. That's called Article 5 of the NATO Charter.
Knowing all the articles, me just saying that thingy.
I do. I'm an obsessive when it comes to this sort of stuff. So,
okay.
And a lot of people on the internet are. So I woke up to heaps of notifications that Article 5 was all go. Someone was going to hit the button any minute now. Poland's been gagging to be let off the leash and charge right across Belarus. No stopping till Moscow. That sort of thing.
Sounds like a Beastie Boys song. No stopping till Moscow.
Yeah, no sleep till Moscow. But yeah, and it seems to be 2 different theories floating around at the moment. One that it's a Russian air-launched cruise missile called a KH-101 that can only be launched from a bomber, and it's missed its target on the Ukrainian border and sort of plowed into Poland and killed 2 people. The other one is that because there was a massive attack on Ukrainian electrical infrastructure, power stations, substations, that sort of thing, last night, they rained down missiles over the entire country, that it's actually one of their anti-aircraft missiles that would have been trying to shoot down one of these cruise missiles, and it's missed its target, flown into Poland, and killed these 2 people. So I think that's what Biden's probably talking about, that it is a Russian-made missile, but it's Ukraine's one. But it just goes to illustrate just how quickly this shit can get out of control if cooler heads don't prevail.
Yeah.
And, you're on the border there. Anything can happen. And Poland has been a really strong supporter of Ukraine. They funneled a lot of gear straight to Ukraine right from the get-go. So the feeling that they kind of want to get more involved and are looking for an excuse to do so is really, really strong amongst sort of internet commentators.
all those highly skilled internet commentators who sit in their basements, Chewy, and talk through different microphones whilst having purple backgrounds. All those people.
It's not a basement.
I'm in the basement. You've got the purple background. I wonder as well. I mean, some of the countries around Russia, right? Obviously, in this map we're looking at, Russia's off to the east there. I wonder if they're just like going, Russia's vulnerable right now. We need to figure out a way to get US into this and just absolutely, it's time to finish this place off. I know it sounds like a horrible sort of warmongering thing to say, but I'm wondering those people who have been under the thumb somewhat or under the threat somewhat of Russia for decades. I wonder if they're like, yep, let's do this, as Jacinda said. Let's do this.
A lot of ex-Soviet states that, this is part of the reason that Russia has been so aggressive, is that they, by their description, they feel hemmed in by NATO. The problem is there's a whole lot of these ex-Soviet states and countries that were in the Soviet sphere that as soon as they were independent went, right, we don't want Russia coming back, so we'll cuddle up to NATO. You got countries like Estonia and that sort of thing, Poland, Czech Republic, all of those guys, they're like, we don't want Russia back, so we're going to join NATO. And now most recently you got Finland and Sweden, who famously have never wanted to be part of NATO. They just wanted to be independent. Especially Finland. They've got a big old border and a bit of history with Russia
up here.
And my favorite little bit, if you look down, there's that little bit of red all by itself there, just above Poland. Further up. I'm pointing at it. You can't see it. There we go. It's my favorite.
I can't see your fingers. I can't see your mouse on your screen.
There, man.
Okay, I got it.
That's Kaliningrad, and it is part of Russia. It does not share a border with Russia. It's surrounded on all sides. It's only there as a port. But it goes, like, access to it goes from Belarus, which is friendly with Russia, and goes through Estonia. And a couple of months ago, Estonia said, no more. No, you can't take anything to Kaliningrad. We're cutting you off until the war's over. So, there's a lot of tension in this sort of area. And if something kicks off Article 5, it's the big show.
Its own. It's interesting that if this is their port here, they've got obviously access right here to the same sea, haven't they?
Yeah, that ice is up in winter.
Right, I gotcha.
And Finland can just close that off.
I think they call this colloquially the penis here. Is that what they call it? Is it the didn't they say the penis ices up? Something like that? I don't know. I've heard that before. I haven't. I just thought I'd say, like, I pretended like I would. That makes sense, because that would ice up. All right. Yeah, it's
But yeah,
and
that was a hell of a thing to wake up to this morning. And on the other side, because it does feel like we've rewound the clock to 1960 in some ways. Did you watch the moon rocket being launched?
yeah,
Tonight,
it's going
which
on
is
right now.
Artemis 1.
I just had a look at it. I was still watching it, and we watched it go. It obviously was delayed, and I was just actually back upstairs, and people upstairs were just flicking backwards and forwards, still watching it. They're just done it separation and stuff. Hang on, I can bring it up. I'm just going to go into my history, because if I go into my history, along with things like Weird Al Yankovic and Coolio giving it an award, and a whole bunch of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, because I just felt that way inclined tonight. There it is right there, the Artemis launch, and it's still going. Or maybe it's just finished. I must have just finished. All right, but this was just a few minutes ago that was still up there and still going for it. All I can think of, and you know about this for me, how much I love the flat Earth conversation. And one of the things that they always say in the flat Earth world is, oh, they say NASA says that we can't go back to the moon because we don't have the technology now. God, isn't that ridiculous? They had the technology in 1969, but they don't have the technology now. When they say that to me, I normally say to them, those little metal things that used to play music with the bling blong bling, and they spun. I'd say to them, if I handed you one of those, would you be able to play it? No. Why not? Because you don't have the technology to play it, because it's old and things have moved on. You don't have the technology today to use that. But guess what? They're going to the moon. They're going to the moon.
What I got a kick out of learning, because I haven't really paid much attention. Like I knew NASA was going to do another moonshot or whatever, but I didn't follow much. But this new rocket that they've built is basically recycled out of space shuttle parts. It's the main fuel tank of the space shuttle, with a couple with the solid fuel boosters on the side from the space shuttle as well, because they had heaps of them left over when they canned the space shuttle program. So I love this. Was like 40-year-old technology going back to the moon.
Well, the cool thing about what they're doing at the moment, and now this is going to sound a little bit like a loser sort of watching my favorite YouTubers, but do you know Dude Perfect?
Mm-hmm.
Fucking Dude Perfect went to space. Like, for real went to space. But the thing that I enjoyed most about watching it, this is stupid. It's a strange thing, because I like trick shots and basketballs, but they always yell at the camera. It annoys me. But the thing that I found most interesting about them going up into space in Bezos's thing is, have you seen this booster? How it lands?
Yeah.
So you're talking about recycling. Have a look at this booster. People who are watching, have a look at the booster. So the booster is designed obviously not to splash into the ocean, because if space travel is going to be a real thing, you got to be able to reuse the parts. And people who are watching, look what this freaking thing does. So this is the thing that sends them up there, then disconnects. It lands like it's dropping itself onto a little dime and stands there and goes, okay, I'm home again. Look at that. That's lands itself to be used again.
SpaceX did a similar thing with their rocket boosters, because usually when you launch something like this, your rocket boosters are gone and you've got to build them again. SpaceX made them so they could come back down and land on a barge in the middle of the ocean. And I love watching those tests, because you could pretty much go, oh, is this one going to explode, or is this one going to make it? But it's crazy, right? When you look at landing on other planets and stuff like that, like Mars and the moon, we've been able to land rockets like that. We've just never bothered to do it on Earth. And I guess it's because of the gravity is much higher or whatever.
Well, but also because it hasn't been like a like, what do you call a bus? Like a commercial, people taking passengers, reusable. Yeah. It hasn't had to be reusable, but now that it has to be reusable, like if there's going to be space travel, if you're going to be able to take some kind of rocket, go into the lower atmosphere and land in New York in 6 or 3 or 2 hours rather than 16, then they got to be able to use those things again tomorrow. And it's pretty amazing what they're doing with them.
Look at that. 2 stories, boom, boom, about rockets.
Okay, now speaking of rockets and getting one up here, let's talk about Donald Trump. Because
that fucking guy.
I know most people know what's going on. I was watching it today live. Let's just have one of these New Zealand silver foxes give us a bit of a heads up as to the story. It's only in 1.5 minute him reporting this, so it'll give us a nice little synopsis.
And while Joe Biden oversees an international crisis, the man he replaced says the war...
That was funny, actually. Joe Biden was overseeing an international crisis to do with a war, and Trump was having a vanity project, you know, and while spending the whole time mocking Joe Biden. Here we go.
War wouldn't have happened if he'd been in charge. That insight from Donald Trump came as he officially launched a bid to get his old job back. Here's Dewey Priest.
It's official. Donald Trump is taking a third tilt at the White House.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
His announcement comes off the back of underwhelming results in the midterm elections for the Republican Party, where a red wave failed to materialize and many of Trump's highly backed candidates lost.
Together, we will be taking on the most corrupt forces and entrenched interests imaginable. Our country is in a horrible state. We're in grave trouble.
Now, he's right that the country is in a horrible state and they're in grave trouble. He is completely right with that. But I think he's thinking about something else, not the horrible state it's actually in, because that's a fair statement. It is in a horrible state. Things are going terribly, and there is danger all around.
I just love if he made reference to, like, the country's in a terrible state. There was almost an insurrection that I wasn't part of. Don't ask me anything about that. But yeah, I mean, this has been kind of like, everybody has known that it'd probably happen. Like, cooler heads in the Republican Party have been going, hey man, just pump the brakes a little bit. Timing's not great. And
well, that's exactly what they've been saying.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Because it's like, for him, it's win-win. It keeps him out of jail, or he gets back into the White House again.
Well, one of the things, if that's part of his plan, right, to help move away from the criminal conviction-y type things.
And let's be fair, I don't like the term Trump and plan. It assumes that something's been written down.
Well,
we know he can't read.
This won't stop it. If you are the president or if you are the nominee, some leniencies can be given, you know. But what he will be able to do, and actually coming up later on tonight, we're talking to Tracey Barnett, who's a journalist and a political commentator. She makes this point as well, is at the very least, he can then use all these things that are being brought against him as the victim card, saying, see what they're trying to do to me. See how they're trying to get your president put in jail, so he can actually use it for fodder to further his own end. And I don't want to think about Donald Trump's end either, but, you know, let's play a bit more of this.
In a wide-ranging speech that lasted more than an hour, he attacked the Biden administration on news.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. Honestly, I couldn't do it. I watched it and I was like, I've had enough of that drone.
Fronts, from the economy to illegal immigrants and an ongoing energy crisis. He spoke glowingly of his relationship with North Korea's Kim Jong-un and even claimed Russia's war on Ukraine wouldn't have happened under his presidency.
The decline of America is being forced upon us by Biden and...
No, it's because Putin would have had Putin like this. And cradling at the same time, and so Putin wouldn't have the ability or the time to go and do it because Trump would have been
I'm unhappy about all
entertained.
of that.
The radical left lunatics running our government right into the ground.
The speech venue, his Florida resort, raided by the FBI just months ago. Donald Trump is still being investigated by federal and state authorities.
He is very agitated by the existence of these investigations. He has attacked them, professed his innocence, and being on the campaign trail gives him an open microphone.
Joe Biden's response on Twitter was brief and to the point, but Donald Trump sees it differently.
We will make America great again. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Thank you.
The Republican Party must now decide whether to endorse a candidate whose failure to accept his 2020 election defeat pushed American democracy to the brink.
Now, one thing that's really interesting is the Republicans who were endorsed by Trump and pushing what they call the big lie, the conspiracy theorists, they pretty much lost out in the midterms. So it's been proven, I think, to be a losing message. So it will be interesting to see what he does. We put up on the YouTube channel the actual announcement. If you haven't seen it yet, I won't play it all for you now, but it's 2.5 minutes.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
So you can go have a look at that. It's on the YouTube channel. Kyle Kalinske put out Ivanka Trump's message. I'm assuming this is off Instagram. I love my father very much. This time around, I'm choosing to prioritize my young children and the private life we are creating as a family. I do not plan to be involved in politics. I wonder why. While I will always love and support my father, going forward, I will do so outside the political arena. I'm grateful to have had the honor of serving the American people, and I will always be proud of many of our administration's accomplishments. Now, there is many reports out there of people who know Ivanka Trump that she's like, why does everybody hate me so much? Why are my businesses all failing? And then this comes out, you're like, I wonder why. I also have an interesting question that, once again, when I talk to Tracey Barnett later on, this does come up, but I'd be interested to get your take on it, Chewy, because we all know that politicians get caught out by their own words when they get played back to them. Every politician seems to do it. But for some reason, Donald Trump seems so much easier to find him saying the completely opposite thing. This is a quote from, I tweeted this out today. This is a quote from quite early on in the in his speech. He said, "When the virus hit our shores, I took decisive action and saved lives." So he said that today, to which I tweeted that out, and then of course added the GIF, "It'll go away at some point, it'll go away." And there was also that 15 cases, the 15 cases will soon be 0. So it feels to me, maybe it feels to me because it was so recent, it's easier to think about these things, but it feels to me like he's easier to go, no, you don't get to just change like that. This is not what you were saying 6 weeks ago. It was the opposite. But then again, maybe I'm being naive. Maybe that is everybody. And it's just because he was the last one, it's easier to remember. I don't know.
I mean, with Trump, there was the whole meme that there was always a tweet that if he said something, someone would just crawl his Twitter feed and then he'd find something that he's basically arguing the other point of view. He is literally a wind vane. I mean, him announcing today was always a foregone conclusion, but I still felt fucking sick when he did, because he's spewed so much nonsense out into the sphere, and just toxicity is everywhere he goes. And now we definitely have to put up with that through it until the election, and probably past it as well. And it bleeds outside of America. It bleeds into our election and the way that people speak here. It's crazy. And I just don't think that anyone in the States has learned the lesson. Like, all of the major networks, apart from MSNBC, carried his speech live.
Right.
And this always his thing in the previous elections, is because he is such a content generator. $1 billion
worth of free content.
Absolutely. Like tune into the news and see the insane thing that Donald Trump just said.
Yeah.
And it put him in so many people's living rooms. I just feel like the US media haven't learned that lesson of like, well, maybe we shouldn't carry it without any context.
Yeah, but that implies that the US media, I mean, what you're saying would be, if the US media, when say learn their lesson, meaning helping him get in, that would imply they don't want him to get in. I mean, Donald Trump was a gold mine for all media outlets in America. Yeah. You know, the failing New York Times subscription stuff went triple, went through the roof. So that would, maybe they know exactly what they're doing, and maybe, you know, the shareholders and the boards of these media companies would love to have Donald Trump in because of the content he creates.
And you've said, look, if Biden runs, he'll lose.
I think so.
I tend to agree with that, and he's making noises that he will run because, I guess. Yeah. But, I mean, that means that the Democrats are going to spend months fighting each other. It's just, God, Can we just fast forward to the good ending?
Well, here's something good for you as well. CNN did quite a good job today of a little bit of fact checking of the actual speech. It's not, and they did it in quite a good. It's like 3 minutes, so it's not like we have to sit here for an hour to fact check the 300 bullshits. They just pulled a few of them out, and they had a few things to say. So let's listen to what CNN picked out of the speech, what they thought needed to be corrected and talked about.
No secret during his administration, the former president lied a lot, like a lot. With that in mind, let's bring in CNN fact checker Daniel Dale to look at his remarks tonight. Daniel, what stood out to you?
Anderson, that was more accurate because he was indeed on teleprompter than much of what you'll hear from him at rallies, but it was still less accurate than anything you'll hear from basically anyone else in politics. Just wildly incorrect claims. The claim that ISIS was defeated in 3 weeks, that he went decades without a war, that no previous president had taken in $1.
That was a really weird one. And I saw the first half of it or so. He said, I've been doing this for decades and never started a war. It's like he was president for 4 years. I don't know what he thought about he could do for the other, 16 years to make up decades where he was responsible for starting a war or not. That looked like a proper brain fart. It was quite a weird one, actually.
From China. These claims are not even close to true. And then there was a general narrative about the economy under him. He can say whatever he wants about the pre-pandemic economy, but he suggested that the economy was thriving 2 years ago when he left office. Look, he left office with the unemployment rate about double what it is today. So the idea that the Biden administration did not have to do anything and everything would have been hunky-dory is just absurd as well.
There's a couple of, I know, other moments that stood out to you. I want to play one now. Let's listen.
The Green New Deal and the environment, which they say may affect us in 300 years, is all that is talked about. And yet nuclear weapons, which would destroy the world immediately, are never even discussed as a major threat. Can you imagine? They say the ocean will rise 1/8 of an inch over the next 200 to 300 years.
Ugh. Anderson, Trump was inaccurate here about climate change, both specifically and generally. This specific claim, he said unnamed people say the oceans will rise 1/8 of an inch over the next 200 to 300 years. That is totally wrong. In reality, the U.S. government's National Ocean Service says this. They say sea level along the U.S. coastline is projected to rise on average 10 to 12 inches in the next 30 years, which will be as much as the rise measured over the last 100 years. But Trump also generally suggested climate change might only affect us in some general way in 300 years. That also is not true. It's affecting us now, as we know, in a whole variety of serious ways. And that's not some radical left-wing view. Here's what the Pentagon, the military, said in a report last year. They said increasing temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, more frequent, intense, and unpredictable extreme weather conditions caused by climate change are exacerbating existing risks and creating new security challenges for U.S. interests.
Oh, commuters having a little think.
A
little think. Yeah, maybe the FBI's got involved and Donald Trump sent them through to stop these things from happening. Maybe that's our message to get out of there.
I mean, it doesn't matter what Trump says.
And finally, Anderson, nobody is not paying attention to nuclear issues because they're focused on climate change. That's not a real choice. Again, that's absurd.
I know there's another moment that jumped out at you. I want to play.
Let's leave it at that because it looks like we're glitching a little bit there anyway, so we won't. But you get the point. Yes, Terry, you were saying.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what he says. It doesn't matter to the people that will vote for him, whether it's accurate or not. If it'll confirm their bias, then they're happy. If they point at someone and said, that's the bad guy, they'll be happy. Red team, blue team, all over again. Because he was doing the same stuff last time round and he won. And the media was doing the same stuff last time round and he won. And the Democratic Party was doing the same stuff last time and he fucking won. And no one seems to be learning any lessons. And it's infuriating.
I think that I heard a commentator talking today about the lessons to be learned. And because although I think it was free, so you can find it if you want, they're talking about that the big lie hasn't been tested yet. I think it's fair to draw the analysis that the people who ran spouting the big lie didn't get through. It's the only test we've got at the moment. But what will happen is the Republicans will look at that and they'll go, what do we need to do to win next time round? So they will pivot and the Democrats won't. They'll do the same thing. This was one of the analysis I saw online today. And then you'll be facing an election where the Republicans have moved to some kind of messaging or somewhere else that's going to work for them, but the Dems won't do anything about it because they just won, and they don't do politics as well. And they end up losing because there's a new boogeyman to be scared of that the Republicans will make up.
Yeah,
I like what Mark had said there. I see you've highlighted that didn't start a war but nearly broke up NATO, prepared the way for Ukraine. So there you go. There you go.
I mean, he's proved that he's quite happy to pal up to dictators and strong men and that. Because, I mean, that's what he sees himself as. Why a US president would get up and talk about his relationship with Kim Jong-il is fucking beyond me.
The thing that's even weirder is why the patriotic Americans are that far gone that they won't even see that. Like, this is a country that's threatened to send missiles to your west coast. And to be so far gone in support, to be so blinded by your support of this one human being, that you're like, yeah, I know, but they say they're going to bomb America if they could, but no big deal. You know, that interests me about the human condition.
People are so set on their teams, right? Is that they're going, Biden is supporting Ukraine, and I don't like Biden. And I don't like the Democrats. Therefore, I'm on Putin's side. And I'll believe state-sponsored Russian propaganda coming out. And these are patriotic Americans. You know, people that would think back to communism. You know, that's the big enemy. Well, that was Russia. Yeah, but that was Russia before.
Yeah.
You know, and now... It's all muddy, and I'm not going to get into the details, but I'm pro-Russia for some reason.
Yeah, because Orange Boy is. You and Politica, we are saying that thing, and I can see the comment there about, you know, fact-checking political opponents is largely ineffective. I still think, though, one needs to provide the water for the horse to be led to. Now, you can't force the horse to drink, that's the saying, but you lead a horse to water. So I agree that it's potentially largely ineffective, but in America, when you're looking about, you know, the election results being 49-51, even when it's a, you know, mentally deficient former athlete cheating, you know, lunatic like Herschel Walker, then that 1%, that potential movement could actually be the difference between winning and losing. So
I think what it is that, like, say, live fact checking or proper, like, his proof fact checking is too smart. It's too smart. What there should be is every debate, every rally, any televised event where some of the politicians getting out there should just be a big ripped dude with no shirt and a gong. And every time the lie is told and someone goes, oh no, we fact checked that one, he fucking hits the gong. It just needs to be a gong. There doesn't need to be an explanation of why the greasy naked man is hitting a gong. Everybody just needs to know that that's when they tell a lie. Who gets more gongs?
Speaking of fact checking, should we get on to
I will be the dude with the gong.
Well, there's a bit of fact checking being done today. And this evening, News Hub's reporting Christopher Luxon, who appears to be asleep in that image, has done a U-turn on his U-turn. So let's have a look. First of all, this was a conversation with Christopher Luxon on the AM show this morning. There is some criticism coming from Labor about National's policies and ideas around climate issues. Labor is saying at best you're being accused, National, of greenwashing. At worst, you're being accused of climate denial. That's where this conversation starts. Let's have a listen to what Mr. Luxon's got to say about that.
Do they have a point? You've opposed the clean car discount, minimum standards for new cars and homes, support to remove coal boilers. You continue to wait to reduce methane emissions. This is what they're claiming. And yet you agree with net zero by 2050. So how will you get there if not through these means?
Yeah, so Ryan, I mean, what's going on here is, look, we deeply are committed to net carbon zero by 2050. We're the party that actually signed New Zealand up to the Paris Agreement, and we believe very strongly in actually delivering those targets.
You know what that is? We're the party who signed up to the Paris Agreement. That's like Republicans saying Abraham Lincoln was the one who freed the slaves. So we're good. It's basically the same thing.
But the means by which we deliver those ends, which may be the same as the government, but the way that we'll do it will be different. To give you some examples, the first thing is we believe that the emissions trading scheme is our best chance to be able to bend our emissions profile here in New Zealand.
So that's important, right? So they're saying, so this is really important, a yes-no column, and I've sort of done this. They've said yes to the emissions trading scheme. So National saying yes to it. But this whole conversation, what you'll hear is Mr. Luxon saying yes, but we want to do it our way. Yep. That's basically what this conversation comes to. Yes, but they're not good enough. We're better. So yes to all the outcomes, yes to all the schemes, but we want to do it. We want to do it like we want to do it. That's basically the summation of this whole conversation.
The ETS is famously flawed and just lets farming keep doing what they're doing. That's what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, we get to that later on when he talks about businesses basically monitoring themselves. But let's just play a bit more of what he's talking about, because he gives some examples of what Labor's doing that they shouldn't be doing, like planting pine trees. But then he says what we should be doing is planting natives and mangroves. And I'm like, well, hang on. If one of you, the solution is planting trees bad, and the other solution is planting trees and vegetation good, like, is this really? Are you guys really battling? Where's your point of difference? What's your key indicator here? If you're a business, what's your unique selling point? But they're planting pine trees bad. You're planting natives good. I mean, I'd much rather plant natives than pine trees in general. But when you're talking about as a carbon catching situation, it just seems that there's a bit of clutching going on here. Let me play a bit.
But at the moment, all we have to do is be able to offset some carbon through planting, pine trees and farmland across New Zealand, rather than actually looking at other things that we can put into that, like carbon capture, native trees, and even looking at, seagrasses and mangroves on our oceans. So, there's a lot of alternatives we could be using there. The second thing I'd say to you is we looked at the government's emissions reduction plan. There's 330 actions in there. Half of them are about Heeeeee and meetings and post-it note sessions and facilitating strategies rather than actually getting things done. We think the government should do things that uniquely a government can do to accelerate the emissions piece. One would be to make sure that we're investing in, say, an EV network, a charging network across the country.
Love it.
Two would be make sure we're investing really strongly in research and development. And three, make sure we get planning reform in place so that we can actually undertake offshore wind and faster renewals and resource consents. We wouldn't be, for example, Ryan, actually having everyday Kiwis contribute to the ETS at the pump only for that money to then be given away by the government to large multinational companies that should be doing that climate reduction themselves. That's just...
So that's the point I was going to make. Large multinational companies that should be doing it themselves. So this is National saying, we're not going to regulate companies. We trust that these businesses are ethical and they're going to do it themselves. Also, some of the things that he was talking about in there is the 330 actions in the emissions reduction plan. Honestly, I am chomping at the bit to go through that and see what those 330 are, because he's saying half of them are basically bureaucracy. This is National saying no more bureaucracy. Now, it's about 200 pages long, this document. I was looking at it today. I actually had it brought up. I'm going to do my best to go and have a look through it, because I question the way he's selling it. Like, of the 330, 165 are good, but there's 165 wasted things in there as well. Research and development sounds very airy-fairy. I mean, and what government's not doing that.
Sounds good, but has absolutely no detail.
Invest in an EV network. On board. Done. Sign me up. I'm there. However, later on in this conversation, he'll start talking about the rich Tesla owners. The poor farmer and the rich Tesla owner. So on one hand, he's going and invest in this EV network, but then he's saying for those rich Tesla owners who we don't really want to support. So there's a mixed messaging going on. I'm going to
tear my new asshole on that one, to be honest. I get really confused when I agree with things that he's saying. Like, he's right. If you're comparing planting pine trees versus planting natives are the better carbon sink. But you know what they're not? They're not profitable. Farmers want to give up some farmland, some unproductive hilly farmland, to plant pine trees that they can harvest in 25 years for the ETS carbon credits. But if they have to convert them to natives and they can't harvest them that way, I just find it interesting that he's taking, like I said, if I agree with him, I'm instantly suspicious.
And then the
Like-
other thing about we're not going to charge regular Kiwis at the pump. It's like, okay, so there's a tax
does that
break.
mean?
It means there's taxes out of our fuel that we purchase that's going towards, climate issues, and they're going to get rid of it. So then the question is, well, where's that funding coming from, Mr. Luxon? Which wasn't asked, obviously, but
This is my whole thing with National, is that they're always after that sugar hit, right? There's no
Yeah.
long-term thinking there. And this is what the transition to EVs, doing carbon capture and all of that sort of stuff, it's all long-term thinking, which they've proven that they're incapable of doing. They want to packet these things in the little bits and pieces, like say the EV credit is part of a system to get older cars and inefficient cars out in favor of EVs. But they want to packet it and it'll break the whole thing. And then they'll go, well, guess it just doesn't work.
Well, let's look at that, because now Mr. Luxon's about to, after wanting part of his policy or part of his ideas is let's set up this really shit hot EV network, but not for those rich Tesla workers, drivers. Let's have a listen to that.
But, here's a good example. We've got a situation at the moment where we've got a government that is actually taxing people with utes, and there is no alternative, and then actually subsidising those utes, wealthy Tesla drivers by giving them subsidies. We think there'd be a different way to do it. We'd keep the clean car discounts and make sure that we've got low emission cars coming in.
Important.
We would actually invest in an EV charging network, and we'd also make sure we're actually helping lower income people access EVs, not rich people.
Okay, all right. So you would keep the clean car discount, and okay, that's interesting. All right.
So that's a policy change. They'll keep the clean car discount. Now, look, let me be fair here. Let me be fair for a second. I think he has a point that if there is a necessity for a ute, at the minute, there's not an alternative. I wonder if the ute thing should have started up when the Rivians and the Ford Lightnings and the things had to come in, so there was an alternative. Let me just put it this way. I can see the point when you don't have an option that feels a bit unfair. I'm okay with that concept. Now, I also don't have a problem with the ute tax, but in general, like if you drive a sedan, there is an option. You can choose this or that. At the moment, if you're a farmer or if you are in need of a ute, there is not an option. So I think that's at least an okay conversation to have.
Can I pick this apart a little bit?
Yep.
So they always go on about the ute tax, right?
Yep.
The ute tax. And they always make it sound like if you have a ute, you are getting taxed, which is not true. And they know it's not true, but it's not helpful to their argument to sort of specify that the tax goes on newly imported and registered utes.
Yeah. Buying new utes.
That are not efficient, more polluting, that sort of thing.
If you've already got a ute, let me understand. Are you suggesting that? Because I completely understand what you're saying. That's why before the ute tax came into place, it was a massive upswing of buying new utes, because before it came in place. Are you suggesting that there's a vibe in the public that they think if you own a ute, you're going to get a tax every year or not? Because that's not the case, and I know that's not the case, but is there a feeling out in society that they've spun it that way to make people think that?
Oh, I absolutely think that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then now let's look at who uses utes. Again, their spin on this is, of course, it's punishing farmers with no other options, right? This is kind of similar to what you're saying, is that there is very few options for EV utes in the market at the moment.
Well, I don't think there are any in New Zealand yet. I don't think
there
so.
are
Anyway.
two, and there
in
will
the market.
be
Okay.
There'll be three more by the end of next year, all going well. But there is a caveat on that. They are two-wheel drive.
Right.
Okay. So if you're wanting it for your farm, probably not the best bet. But this is only going to affect farmers that needed to replace their vehicle. Right. And most farmers would be able to, if I have to spread it out another couple of years, I will. But the vast majority of people that drive utes in this country are tradespeople.
Mm-hmm. People
that are mainly driving in the city, carrying their gear around. Two-wheel drive is absolutely fine.
Yep.
And 200-300 kilometer range, absolutely workable.
Yep. Fair.
So this is the whole thing, is those guys should be looking at those. I need a new vehicle. I'm going to get a big tax break for getting that.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of this, because they'll harp on about Tesla owners, right? Like the only cars that are being bought are Teslas. Teslas are one of the most popular cars, and they just scrape in under the rebate. But so do Nissan Leafs, and they're the number one sellers, both new and second hand. But we're not talking about Nissan Leafs because that doesn't give the image of rich people.
Yeah, they're not flashy.
MG EVs or the new BYD Attos and that sort of thing. They're all around that $40,000 to $50,000 mark rather than the $70,000 and $80,000 mark. But we won't talk about those. We'll just talk about Teslas because of the image.
But there's another thing in this, and we kind of skipped over it a bit, but we was talking about getting lower income earners into EVs, right? On one hand, he says, we're not going to charge people at the pump and we're not going to subsidize rich people getting EVs, right? We don't want the subsidies. But he's also talking about getting lower income earners into EVs. How's that going to happen? Well, the only way that's going to happen is through subsidies. So actually, do you want subsidies or do you not want subsidies? Do you want subsidies to get people into EVs or not? Or are you just saying that not to get into this brand, but get into this brand? So again, the messaging is very, very mixed. And I'll say again, you may have missed it, but I'm going to play you a clip to show you. He made a massive policy change there of keeping the clean car rebate. And you heard Ryan Bridge actually go, oh, so you're going to keep that. At no stage did he refute that and go, oh, no, hang on, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to say that. Now, later in the afternoon, he gets called on that for doing a U-turn, and then he offers what he should have said, and what he should have said is also a U-turn on what they were saying a few weeks ago. So that's the U-turn on the U-turn. We'll play that for you in a sec. But first, the other part about this, which is very has annoyed a lot of principals around the place, is Christopher Luxon talking about truancy again and talking about kids being away from school and basically laying it at the feet of not only the principals, but pretty heavily them contributing to it. Principals this afternoon and this evening have come out pretty annoyed at what the leader of the opposition is doing. And it raises the question, this has happened before with National, what are they going to do to quote unquote rank our schools? What are they going to do to identify the quote unquote good schools? And how will they measure it? What would be the metric for that? Because if it's just attendance, I would say that that's not the best metric for ranking success within a school. But I'll play this for you first because this is the interaction that people are talking about. And then I'll play you the news story, which reflects back to this interaction. So this is about, he basically is getting asked, what would you do to help the education outcomes at school if you were government, right? Because he's complaining about the outcomes. What would you do about it?
Well, the first thing we have to do around education is we have to get our kids to school, Ryan. I mean, we have 60% of our kids not at school regularly. We have 100,000 chronically absent.
How?
And I just want New Zealand to understand those numbers because that is really incredibly sobering. Other developed countries run at about 80, 85% around the world.
How do you do that?
What we've got to do is have a really big focus on attendance. Yes. So the first thing is we've got to make sure government is actually putting resources into truancy officers, getting kids to school. We need to make sure that we've actually got leadership in schools that is actually very much focused on getting kids into school.
But they are.
I'll talk a little bit about a school I visited that's doing an exception.
There's no school leader who's not focused on that.
There's mixed. No, there is a mixed standard of leadership across our schools and across our principals that actually means that they're not focusing as strongly on getting.
So there's a mixed standard of leadership. In other words, in the schools, some of them are good leaders, some of them are bad leaders. Let's not get it twisted. That's what he's saying. He's saying within each school, some of them are good, mixed standards, what he said. Some of them are not good.
Kids to school as they can.
So you're saying some principals,
we have to call parents to responsibility.
You're saying some principals aren't focused on truants, on getting kids into their schools.
Well, here's an example, Ryan. We have 77% of our Decile 1 kids not going to school regularly.
So Decile 1 principals aren't focused on attendance.
No, I'm just saying it requires strong leadership, and we need to support that leadership to be able to get that attendance rate up. Last week, I went to Manurewa Intermediate School. It was the most inspiring school I have ever visited in my life.
Okay, so which schools aren't inspiring you?
And the reason is...
Which principals aren't inspiring you?
Manurewa, I'll tell you... Well, Manurewa Intermediate School is a Decile 1A school, and they have attendance rates in the 90%, 80 to 90%.
Yeah, because they've got good school leaders. So which schools? Because you've said that some...
They've got very strong school leaders. They've got great staff. They call their parents to the responsibility and make them really accountable for getting their kids to school and showing up at parent-teacher interviews, and they have really deeply engaged programs and therefore deeply engaged kids and students in study. And I would just encourage you, go out and visit that school because it is so exciting to see.
Okay, no, that's great. That's fantastic.
has to accept abysmal results when we have pockets of excellence like that. We just need to make sure we've got more of those pockets up and down the country.
So who is accepting of abysmal attendance records? I mean, this is the thing. Today we're going to have principals who are saying, hang on a minute, is he talking about me?
No, what I'm talking about is we have standards of excellence where you can get a decile 1 school delivering high levels of attendance.
Oh dear. How long have I got to go on this? There's still another minute or so to go, so we will let this play through because it's worth getting to the end of it before we play the next story.
Again, old Ryan getting stuck in.
Yeah, I mean, good on. I mean, we've got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, there are a few sort of softball hang questions in there. Here it comes back. Ready? Here we go. 3, 2. What do they call that? The something of death, the circle of death, or something.
And yet across the whole country, we can't. And it requires a systemic response to say, we're not going to make any more excuses. You can't run a country and have a future when you have 40% of your kids at school, attending school. That's just not going to cut it. It's a moral failure. It's a social failure. It's an economic crisis. So we have to all, government, schools, and parents, be really accountable for getting our kids to school. That's what matters most in our education system. The rest of it, yes, we need to go back to teaching basics. We have really falling levels of academic achievement. But the first thing is we've got to get our kids to school. So when we see things working, like Manurewa Intermediate, we want to understand what is happening there and why are they achieving such excellent results, and what can we learn from them. And
got to say, for the party of personal freedoms and the party of less government intervention and stuff, talking about how we have to get families, and that sounds very social engineering to me. I don't think National was about that, getting families and stuff on board and holding them more accountable.
I think I can unravel this one. They'll be talking about brown families, I would imagine.
Oh, is that what it is?
There we go.
So you can tell the good families by the lack of melanin in the skin. Is that basically the way you do it? The more the melanin, their
postcode. Just their postcode.
Although, truly, being someone who grew up in and around South Auckland, Manurewa is a very PI area, just to be fair to anyway.
Can we just, again, I know we harp on about this. Pandemic's not fucking over.
Yeah.
Like, people are staying home. The schools are a germ factory. There's a lot of stuff in there. And it just seems to be national. There's always got to be a crisis. There's always got to be a crisis. I think most of the time schools are perfectly able to manage their roles and attendance.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so now you've seen the story. Yeah. You've seen keeping the clean car rebate. There's some good principles out there. There's some bad principles out there. Obviously, he didn't use that word, but he talked about the mixed, whatever it was, leadership. So through the afternoon, this actually turned into another story about the U-turns that he made and the response that principals were giving. Let's play this, and then you can get the gist of it.
Hoki mai anō, welcome back. The Education Minister has called on National leader Christopher Luxon to apologise to principals for pointing the finger at them for the truancy crisis.
Luxon, however, is digging in, but as political editor Jenna Lynch reports, he's pulled an almighty U-turn on a climate policy.
Laser focused on his issue of the day,
abysmal levels of attendance at our schools.
Christopher Luxon taking aim on AM, his target, the truancy crisis.
We need to make sure that we've actually got leadership in schools that is actually very much focused on getting kids into school.
But principals became the point of impact.
There is a mixed standard of leadership across our schools and across our principals that actually means that they're not focusing as strongly on getting kids to school.
Hora School Principal Pat Newman, a former Labour candidate, unimpressed.
And I'm very, very disappointed in Mr. Luxon when he attacks people who are doing their damn best to get children into school.
I think those people who get out of bed every morning and go and flog their guts out to provide our kids with the best education possible really don't deserve those sorts of, cheap shots from politicians.
The Education Minister says an apology is in order.
I think an apology wouldn't go amiss.
Will you apologise?
No.
But he did try to clean up this clean car mess.
We'd keep the clean car discount.
Right. Whoops, that's a big old U-turn. National is very, very opposed to the clean car discount scheme, or what they call the U-tax.
Will you scrap the clean car discount?
I misspoke this morning. What I meant was we're going to keep the clean car standard.
They're supposed to be opposed to that too, now saying they'll have a standard, just a different one to the government.
U-turn on a U-turn on a U-turn. The first politician to complete a policy donut.
Do you understand your own climate policy?
Absolutely, totally understand it.
A lesson for Christopher Luxon today: do your own homework.
There you go. That means we wrap
Policy
it up.
donut.
Yeah.
Grant Robertson off the top rope with a steel chair. That was fucking amazing.
The other thing about this, right, and I know we harp on a bit about this, it's that when the left, or when Labour in particular, adds layers of bureaucracy, it's the end of the world. Yet, as you've highlighted there with Paul saying about the truancy officers, they've talked about subsidising, they've talked about getting lower income people into cars. That'll be a level of bureaucracy. They've talked about more truancy officers. That'll be a level of bureaucracy. It just seems that when National wants to add bureaucracy, it's for the right reason and they can justify it. And anyone else adding bureaucracy is big government. It's a little bit like in America with Roe versus Wade, having to get permission from your state whether you're going to have an abortion is the ultimate form of big government, whereas it's the Republicans. It almost feels disingenuous, Chewy, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, and look, this is kind of a side issue, but I was trying to engage in a dialogue with what's his name, Rimmer Seymour, David Seymour,
Rimmer,
on Twitter today. Well, actually yesterday, because he was doing a photo op with some jeweler up in Auckland that had been robbed, like just a smash and grab in daylight. People came in and smashed his cabinets, grabbed his shit and ran. They all got arrested, but let's not focus on that. But there's this picture of him standing outside this jewelry store saying that this guy had been turned down for funding for bollards for ram raiding because he hadn't been robbed yet. And it's just like, well, hang on. This wasn't a ram raid. And are you saying the state should be involved in funding things for business that should be able to stand on their own 2 feet, party of of personal responsibility, and you're on your own? To date, Mr. David Seymour has not responded to my comments.
Because you're looking to get banned again, is that what it is?
No, I was polite, sir. I haven't called him Rimmer yet. I'm working up to it because he's ignoring me now. But yeah, they're all party of personal responsibility unless you're a person that they don't like.
Yeah, it's the classic bait and switch. It's like less government. Like, what is the one that Labour wanted to do? Bring for getting people off wins, bring in a whole new layer of people to train youth.
Yeah, job coaches.
There would be hundreds, if not thousands, of new people employed in a bureaucratic sense, whilst they're talking about there being 14,000 new bureaucrats. Truancy officers, that's a government appointment. It frustrates me. It frustrates the fuck out of me, actually.
Yeah. But yes, do you think when Luxon goes on TV and he goes off and he goes to his assistant or whatever, how do you think that went? And she just gives him a blank look and he goes, probably shouldn't have said all of that, eh? And then he just goes to have a wee sit down, puts a wee flannel on the head, and then has to go on another show going, I misspoke. I misspoke. I didn't mean that. I was meaning the other thing. He's just bad at this.
However, in saying that, at the moment, although we talked about the bias within polls the other night, you got to say that probably National today would be the favourites to win, even with that. I mean, it's the Donald Trump, isn't it? They couldn't be. It's the Herschel Walker. They couldn't have a worse candidate, and Herschel Walker he might be the worst candidate there has literally ever been in American politics, like literally. To potentially be in the Senate, and he might be in the Senate. And I'm not comparing his level of ineptitude with Christopher Luxon. I'll leave that for someone else to do, but I'm not doing it. But people who can't do their job or bad faith actors, or whatever, still win from time to time.
I want to say one other thing about the EV rebates and stuff like that when they're talking about getting EVs into the hands of lower income people.
Yep.
That doesn't happen like that.
Yep.
That happens in the second-hand market. You got to get the cars into the country and purchased so they filter down to the lower incomes. And hopefully they're going to have some more choice rather than absolutely rooted Nissan Leafs.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is the thing. Everybody wants to talk about Teslas and how they're cars for millionaires, apparently, and all of that sort of stuff. But they also, people that don't like EVs will go, oh, well, the batteries degrade. The batteries degrade in Leafs. They don't tend to degrade in other EVs because they use a completely different chemistry.
Right.
But yeah, I can see this country being absolutely flooded with rooted Nissan Leafs that Japan doesn't want.
Right. Yeah, and also, but look, the question, we've talked about this before about the EV network. I mean, where we live in the world, you know, we're 400 k's to Christchurch and 350 k's to Queenstown and 200 k's to Invercargill. So actually, you need some high speed charges between Dunedin and Christchurch and between Dunedin and Queenstown, and you know, you could never do the West Coast in an EV at the moment. You know, so it's just it is something that needs to happen. I mean, if you live in Auckland or you live in Wellington, or probably if you live in Christchurch, they're already there. They're already around. You know, you can go to work and you can get home again. You can charge overnight. It's different when we're not rural. We are urban. We are a city. But to go somewhere from where we are is a 2.5 to 4 hour drive.
Oh, for
whereas,
sure.
yeah.
And as someone that's looking at getting an EV next year, you know, I'm not going to say no to more charges, but there are quite a few of them. I'm just interested whether Mr. Luxon is suggesting Kiwi Charge network, because of course it'll be called Kiwi Charge. State-owned EV charging infrastructure for Tesla owners, because that's all it is.
We are going to, because we talked about the Russian missile going into, do you say missile or do you say missile? How do you say it?
I say both.
Bombity
but
bomb
I
bomb.
believe that a missile is the best way.
Do you say Poland or you say Poland?
Poland.
Poland, because of the Russian missile going into Poland, it kind of put us back 10 or 15 minutes. So we're going to actually carry over the conversation with Tracey Barnett till tomorrow night. If you are a patron, then it's actually already on Patreon, I think. Yep, there it is, right there. So Tracey Barnett on Trump's announcement and the midterms. I, believe it or not, stole that photo because that's TV3. That's not my studio, just in case you were wondering. So that conversation is already on Patreon. If you are a patron, you can check it out for yourself if you want. But for the rest of us, we will end up doing it probably tomorrow night, just because it's basically a 25-minute conversation and we'll be here till midnight if we play it all the way through, and we're not going to do that, not tonight. But while we're here, let's have a look. You're welcome to jump on board and be a patron. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News, as it says on the bottom of the screen there. There is currently an $8 per month fuck you Elon level, which gives you access to all the other things that we do, and also you can get yourself a nice double tick surround right there. So Elon gives you $8 for one tick. We give you $8 for two ticks. It looks a bit like that. There's me, my profile in there.
That's real good in this economy.
I know, it's two for the price of one, really. So why wouldn't you do it? And the other thing is, if you are currently a patron, or if you're going to be one in the next 48 hours, Saturday morning, we'll have an online meetup. And in the online meetup will be, anyone can come along to it who is a patron. And we will patrons. Yeah, no, I get them confused all the time. They are, people on it are patrons, and the company is Patreon. I think it's about 27. We were aiming for 50 by Christmas, but we'll see what happens. Probably fail, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, we're gonna have a catch up, a group catch up on Saturday morning, a virtual one. So if you're a patron, or if you become a patron before Saturday morning, then you're welcome to join in. We will get together. We've done it once so far and have a bit of a chinwag. It was really good, actually. It was a chance for me to actually speak to you guys and hear your thoughts around what was working and what wasn't working, what you liked and what you didn't like. And it was great. Well, it's good to see Pat Brittenden is commenting on Twitch right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did it wrong again.
See the thing at the bottom that says all. You drop down that menu and you just pick the DOC studio.
I've done it now. Right, get off my nuts.
Excuse me. You're not
Usually I
Putin
just
and I'm
type
not
it.
Trump.
Anyway.
Let us say fond farewell for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night. We have some other conversations coming up this week with a couple of American commentators as well. And just a reminder, if you have any interest in the crazy conversations that I have in my other content, I also run a podcast show called The Department of Conversation. We have long form conversations. Sometimes they're a bit newsy, but not always. Sometimes I love speaking with comedians and entertainment people and various bits and pieces. And on Friday, we are going to be releasing my latest podcast, which is with, I'm having a look now as I'm trying to find it, but I can't find it. I don't know why I can't find. Oh, there it is. And if you are like me and you're a bit of and you love sort of this world, Mike Rinder, who is in America, the Mormon Church, did a former head of Scientology. He was like one of the top 3 people in Scientology. And this little clip that's up on YouTube is what happened behind closed doors after that infamous South Park Scientology episode, because he was behind closed doors with David Miscavige, the leaders of it, the day after that episode came out. So this clip's up on YouTube now, and the whole podcast is released on Friday morning. If you have any interest, you can just actually, speaking of, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, can you do that tonight or whenever you see or hear this? At the moment, I think we're about 12 people short of 2,000 subscribers. I think we're on something, we're something like that. So if you're watching us but you're not subscribed, can you subscribe and help us get over that 2,000 subscribers hump? Would be great. So if you enjoy our content and you haven't subscribed yet to the YouTube channel, do it tonight. Use it as a reason tonight to help us get over that 2,000 mark. All right, Chewy, I think that's me. Anything else you want to get out there?
No, that's all. I just hope we wake up to just everything needs to just calm down a little bit. Everything just needs to chill. Russia.
So tomorrow needs to be a day with no news.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, okay.
That'd be nice. Maybe this moonshot will find out, that the moon's haunted.
Moonshot sounds so dirty.
Well, you put up bloody Bezos's rocket, which fucking did look like a dick. Like they definitely knew it looked like a dick.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if all the engineers like, we could change it a bit, but we're not going to.
I absolutely would do that.
Thank you, team. I appreciate you all, and we'll see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition. Remember, become a patron before Saturday. Join in on the group chat on Saturday morning, probably on Zoom. We did it on Zoom last time, and it seemed to work quite well. And other than that, we'll catch you when we catch you. Thank you, Chew, for tonight. It's been a blast, my friend. And that conversation with Tracey Barnett will be coming up tomorrow, talking about midterms, talking about Trump's announcement, and more as well. All right. All the best, team. Speak to you soon. Hooroo.
Cheers.